This webinar takes place within the annual conference of Climate Alliance, which kicked off this morning and will last until Friday. Additionally, this webinar is also part of the Cities Talk Nature event series, which is part of the Interlace project. And let me explain a few words on the Interlace project. Interlace is an EU Horizon 2020 project on nature-based solutions, of which we are part of. And the Interlace project aims to empower European and Latin American cities to effectively restore urban ecosystems towards more resilient and more inclusive cities. Within the project, we developed the Cities Talk Nature network or platform together with the Latin American city networks FLAGMA and UNGL, as well as with the global city network UCLG. So it's like a cooperation of different city networks in Europe, in Latin America, and globally. And with this platform, Cities Talk Nature, we aim to create and promote learning and cooperation between municipalities and their stakeholders in Latin America and Europe. And we offer different kind of events, for example, different webinars as the one today. This in a nutshell. Before we start now with our speakers, we are going to hear a welcome message from Karen Porras. She is the Executive Director of UNGL. UNGL is the National Union of Local Governments in Costa Rica and one of our partners in the Interlace project. And the video will also quickly introduce the Interlace project.
Interlace es un proyecto de cooperación internacional que tiene como objetivo restaurar y conectar entornos urbanos en ciudades de América Latina y Europa. Forma parte del programa de investigación e innovación Horizonte 2020 de la Unión Europea. El consorcio Interlace está integrado por 21 organizaciones de 11 países, en los que se destacan 6 ciudades: Envigado, Granollers, Cracovia, Chemnitz, Porto Viejo y Cebeima, centros de investigación, redes de ciudades y comunicación.
Como redes de ciudades, la
As city networks, the Latin American Federation of Cities, FLACMA, and the National Union of Local Governments contribute with our connection and our relationship with local governments throughout the region in order for learning and the creation of tools which are generated via the Interlace project will actually reach the greatest amount of municipalities, will facilitate and promote an exchange of knowledge and also experiences through the community of practice. Cities Talk Nature, which we lead in coordination with our parties, Climate Alliance and United Cities and Local Governments, UCLG, through the organization of these virtual and face-to-face events of diverse natures.
Okay, then now we are coming to today's topic, the monitoring and evaluation of nature-based solutions. Could everyone please turn off the microphone? That would be great. In order to deal with climate change and pollution, cities are increasingly building on nature-based solutions in order to restore and protect urban ecosystem as, for example, green areas. So we chose the topic or the focus on monitoring and evaluating nature-based solutions today because we think these are important steps to actually track the strengths and the weaknesses of specific interventions and their performance in particular urban context. So we are very happy to have our two speakers today. The first speaker is Isabel Mello. She works for the Humboldt Institute, Columbia. The institute is a research institute on biological resources. She's also part of the Interlace project and also of the Interlace pilot assessment framework for nature-based solutions, which she will partly present today. So Isabel, thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
You're welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am very happy to be here. I'm going to make this, I'm going to share my screen first.
I'm so happy. What a pleasure. Greetings to everybody. As Felix said, the issue that gathers us today is the monitoring and assessment of nature-based solutions. And I'm going to present a partial framework of the assessment framework that we're developing within the Interlace project framework, which includes assessment and monitoring of nature-based solutions. This framework has been developed or has been led by the Autonomous University of Barcelona, ICTA, and the Humboldt Institute in unison, but also with participations of many different partners of the consortiums and different municipalities that were mentioned by Pablo Ruiz just a little while earlier. So our title for today's talk is Monitoring Nature-Based Solutions, Weaknesses and Strengths of Nature-Based Solutions. How can we actually follow up on these weaknesses and strengths of nature-based solutions? I simply wanted to introduce the topic today by telling everyone that ever since this issue of nature-based solution started to be worked on, ever since we included it in international agendas, and even before that, we've been developing several different nature-based solutions, probably under different names, even if they're the same thing, but this is something that we've coexisted with in the different countries. And this term, nature-based solutions, NBS, involves different components. Well, the issue that brings us together today is to follow up and monitor the strengths and weaknesses related to nature-based solutions. But how can we accomplish this in a systematic and robust fashion to be able to contribute not only to the functionality of nature-based solutions, but also to create and generate information that would be useful to share experiences in other different environments? And as we know, this is an issue which is highly relevant in our international agendas in these last few years. So ever since this issue was included on the international agenda in 2015 and 2016, we've implemented many nature-based solutions, and these have certain commonalities, or they have several common concepts. Obviously, these are solutions that are inspired of and based on nature, and they are presented as alternatives different from normal concretes and different technology solutions. But they also have other components, such as multifunctionality, which make these solutions to not be presented as a solution for only one problem, but rather they encompass benefits for social, economic, and environmental systems. I was also telling you that very probably, or like in the case of Latin America, these nature-based solutions have been implemented under different names. They've been called different things, but basically they have been implementing nature-based solution in one way or another. Please go to the next slide. Okay, so what we wanted to think about here is what would happen if we have the best information or sufficient information, proper information to make the best decisions. How do we know if these solutions that we are implementing, as its name says, are actually solutions that can solve specific problems? And how do we know these nature-based solutions actually are working or not? Because these are very attractive solutions which involve the communities. So it's appropriate to actually measure the impact and the performance and the effectivity. So many questions come about, like, for example, where are the most appropriate places to implement nature-based solutions within my own territory or within my municipality, or if I want to understand how an urban park is actually benefiting or not from the ecological connectivity within my own city. Or, for example, if I want to understand whether a park or whether in my city, I'm talking about an implementer at this particular moment. If I wanted to understand if a park that was actually constructed is actually improving health or the quality of life of the different citizens that live or surround this park. So the question would be, if we would make different actions, if we would react differently, if we understand the answers to these questions, if whether we had a way to answer these questions. Well, this is nothing new. This is the monitoring. This is done in essence in the different administrative procedures. Pablo, please go to page 4. But within the nature-based solution environment, and more specifically in the 2020 Horizons project, we've created several different frameworks of assessment. Please continue to click about 3 times so we can see all of the different graphics. So these have different focuses that go directly from participatory focuses to more technical focuses, like, for example, the FUSICOs. I'm not saying that one of these are correct and the other one is not. Simply, there's a different gradient, different shades amongst all this spectrum with different focus points. Next, please. Number 5, yes. Let me tell you about the focus that we have right now with the Interlace project. An Interlace, our task was to actually create an assessment framework. So based on checking all these previous frameworks, what we did was we wanted to differentiate the fact that this would become a framework that would be sufficiently flexible and participative, or could engage all the different stakeholders, or sufficiently flexible so that the city or the users can actually adapt it and adapt assessment of the conditions to their own project, because not all nature-based solutions, and let me be clear, despite it being ideal to monitor solutions from day 0 when you begin to actually, or even before you begin to implement it, in reality, this doesn't always work in this fashion. So what we wanted to do is create an assessment framework that would be sufficiently flexible, but at the same time, it should have a structure and have scientific rigor, which would be enough, and or would be optimal enough, or more than optimal, strong enough, so that the results that are generated based on these frameworks would be trustworthy. And a very important characteristic would be the cooperation or engagement or participatory component, which is a very strong component within the Interlace project. So we are right now in the process of generating or creating constructing a framework for the assessment, the participatory engagement for nature-based solution. And as I told you, with the flexibility we can apply before actually creating or formulating nature-based solution, but it can also accompany the design phase. I'll explain how in a minute, or it can be done once the solution has already started or is in the works. And this would be the monitoring and assessment components as such, which I'm going to focus on the most right now. Please, next. To page number 6. Well, simply here, I wanted to speak a little bit about how, methodologically speaking, what were our main focus points or our guiding principles. Pablo, can you please tell me if you're hearing me? Yes. Well, I wanted to talk about the guiding principles to assess this assessment framework. As I told you, it needed to be something that looks at or focuses on transformative change and adaptability. It needs to be included within the implementation, we need to include different values, and it needs to be transparent, and we need to promote justice and social inclusion. We used a methodology called Agile methodology, which is also a methodology that is being applied within the Interlace project as well. The Agile methodology or approach, or the main characteristic of the Agile focus, is the possibility of assessing and developing this via cycles involving different stakeholders at different moments. Next, please. To page number 7. Okay, so visually speaking, and to summarize what we did or what we currently do in order to work with this framework, in the beginning, we did a complete revision of the different tools that existed, not only in terms of assessment tools, but any tools that can be useful in the different stages or phases of a nature-based solution. Call it design, implementation, assessment. We collected it and placed it in a database, and later on, together with the partners of this consortium and with the different municipalities that participate, we co-created a pilot assessment framework that has 8 or 9 modules. We still don't have the exact clarity. It can change, but at this moment, it has 8 modules currently. The important thing here is there are 3 that are the highlighted modules, which is the political context, decision framing module, and co-creation, which are modules that any user or any municipality or city can follow in greater or lesser details, depending on their experiences or depending on their reality or context. And the other modules are more specific to what we want to actually accomplish. So what we can do is we can do spatial screening, we can accompany the designing of the solutions, we can, as I told you, focus more on the monitoring or comparing different alternatives. So ever since this framework was done, the 6 different Interlace cities, which are Embinaos, Chemnitz, Puerto Rico, Sebima, which is on a metropolitan area in Costa Rica, Granollers, and Cracovia, metropolitan Cracovia, which are a group of cities, began to implement different nature-based solutions based on these modules. At this moment, not all of them are, well, all of them are going through different phases, but the idea is that via different feedback mechanisms and via processes related to learning, we can contribute to generate a general guide that can serve for other cities, even outside of the Interlace cities. And that's what we're working at this moment. Next. This graph here, or this slide here, is not to be able to read all the letters now, forgive me, but it's just to give you a general idea of how this framework actually works. And I wanted to tell you that this is as a step-by-step process. As I told you, it is guided toward municipalities or cities, or geared to a logical sequence depending on each municipality's reality. The units are like the module, so that's why we call it modular, and it has a co-creative and co-creation process. It's modular because a city can choose one, another, or all of them, or a combination. It's hierarchical, not hierarchical in the sense of participation, but more hierarchical in the sense that there are different levels of depth or going into depth into modules. For example, if we choose the monitoring module, we have the possibility of following a different focus and a step-by-step guide through different modules, and there we continue. Next slide, please. So here I wanted to talk about tier 1, or the simplest tier, where the opening door to the assessment framework is this one that I'm showing you here. And since this is a previous version, but as I told you earlier, a city, what they do is they already have, or they already understand or know what the nature-based solution is that they want to assess. So what they do is they do a checking or a less in-depth approximation of the analysis that is to be done. And what they do is monitor how they made the decisions in terms of the objectives, in terms of the challenges that were going to be tried to overcome using this nature-based solution. And we began the co-creation process in order to develop the screening and the monitoring from the very beginning, involving all the key stakeholders. So then we jump to the monitoring phase. And in the monitoring phase, there are 7 steps, which are the steps that we see outlined here. And I'm going to explain up next how they work. Well, the first step during the monitoring phase would be, please go to the next one. The first step would be to identify the criteria. Every city or every municipality, when they're going to begin to implement, or they started to implement a nature-based solution, this is going to be a solution to specific problems or challenges that are happening within the city. So what are the... She muted herself.
¿Cuáles son los desafíos? Los desafíos que la
So what
ciudad...
are the challenges that the municipality identified working on these nature-based solutions? Then we define specific criteria for assessment. I'm going to give you a practical example so you can understand this better. Next slide. So here, for example, maybe a solution can be an urban park, for example, and it corresponds to challenges such as ecological connectivity. It will respond to large challenges that can be disaggregated or broken down into subunits, which would be the criteria that give us a possibility to convert them or turn them into indicators, which is what will truly allow us to measure later on. So are you on slide number 12? Well, here in slide 12, what I did was create maybe a fake example, just because we're going to begin we're just beginning the process. So that's why this is just a supposition. Let's imagine that we have a city trying to create an urban park. The idea is that this NBS would have different activities or actions that are going to be done. Like, for example, this construction of this park includes maybe planting trees, educational campaigns, and implementation of community gardens. So what challenges were we betting on when we proposed these activities? Well, for example, the planting of trees could correspond to a decreasing of temperature. It can have better connectivity or improving green area connectivity, and will have people to have greater connection with nature and the biosphere. The educational campaign, perhaps it would be focused, this is theoretical, but it could have been focused on the improvement of citizens' health and the implementation of community gardens is to improve the different pollinizing insects and their networks of pollinizing index, and so the different citizens can take ownership of their territory as well. That would be step 1 in order to better understand and actually break down what we wanted to accomplish with this NBS. Can you please go to slide number 13? Afterwards, then we had a workshop. Well, obviously, we previously defined who the key stakeholders were that needed to be involved in each phase or each stage. So we have a workshop where we actually give a weight to each of the criteria. This weighing can be done in several steps. Well, the important thing is to have an assessment of the different indicators where we give each indicator a weighted point system to reflect the importance that each different stakeholder gives to each criteria. And then afterwards, we do a prioritization where we also come to agreements amongst all the participants to see what methodology will be used to prioritize, and we'll choose the three, if we're going to choose the three with the greatest points, or one from each different action point, etc. The important thing is that after this workshop, we can come up with a list with the different criteria that were prioritized by everyone, because this allows us to reflect upon the importance that nature-based solutions has for a varied group, a group with different stakeholders. Many times in the workshops, from the experience that we currently have. Pablo, are you on slide number 13? I'm on slide number 13. So I see the users on 12 still. Yes. Okay, so the important thing is that in this fashion, we're facilitating the possibilities to have many voices be reflected in the monitoring phase. And in our experiences, when we formulate this from the technical side, from the municipalities, nature-based solutions, when they're formulated from the city itself, then we've been surprised positively with the different perceptions of the different stakeholders, the different interested parties, which maybe have a different vision, different importances, they have different perceptions about what is important for them and what nature-based solutions mean for them. And it's also key for the municipality to monitor these types of assessments and include these types of criteria within the monitoring for engagement purposes. So once we have the list of this criteria, then we go to a more technical aspect, which is the defining of indicators or KPIs. These KPIs already exist within literature. In fact, the Nature Network has an actual manual which is very comprehensive. Nonetheless, they can base themselves on different documents, on experience, or on what they're currently measuring, and on the experience that the city has itself or the solution implementers. The important thing is that these indicators, which are the way to possibly measure the evolution of the system in a specific time period, the important thing is that they answer these questions and even other questions so that they are more viable when they are selected. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves is whether these indicators are truly relevant in order to measure the effectiveness of the action. For example, the temperature is something that's very easy to measure. However, does it truly respond to what we want to understand? It has to be completely related or linked to the issue that we're assessing. Another important question would be whether the indicator, whether there's available information related to this indicator, and how easy it is to have or come up with that information, or to have the information available related to that specific indicator. Many times in the different cities, there's a great amount of information that is produced, which is already available, and that makes life easier in terms of creating a monitoring plan. There, we also think about participatory science and how you engage, or the possibility of having the different citizens engaged and participating in data capture, etc. The other question, which is also important, whether it's economically, physically, and technically feasible as well within the city, or for the people that are implementing this NBS solutions, whether we do have the appropriate resources to measure this, understanding that this is a long-term commitment. And a very important factor, sometimes we don't think about this, it's whether the system, call it a nature-based solution or call it whatever component that we're measuring. We need to understand if this truly is reflected in it, or if we truly see the change that we wanted to achieve within the monitoring time that we set for ourselves. Because as all of you know, biological and social times many times take longer than a year or 2 years or the initial phase of a project. So it can be, we can have all the different questions answered, but if we're not going to see the change reflected in that time, then the indicator would not be useful for us. The other question, well, once we have these indicators, the important thing is to ask ourselves a monitoring question that will truly allow us to see whether the changes that we want to achieve can be obtained via this indicator. Here I gave you an example of how in the case, or in that fictitious case, how planting trees actually improves connectivity of our green areas by an increase of one species, or in particular, or the wealth of that species. So there the indicator would be the wealth or the number of species that we assume will increase through time by the simple fact of planting more trees. So what we suggest, after we've already answered our questions, or once we have a question for each indicator and one indicator for each criteria, then we begin our monitoring plan. We'll create the monitoring plan, and let me go quickly because I think my time is almost running up. Can you please go to the next slide? I don't want to take too much of your time, but let's talk about the monitoring action plan, which includes about thinking and laying out on a document, creating or understanding how often we're going to measure, where and who's going to take it, where we're going to store the information, how it's going to be analyzed, and how it's going to be analyzed. So we, as an assessment framework, we suggest that at that moment, and look here, I haven't spoken anything about the implementation per se. At that moment, we do a first assessment of the co-creation process, an evaluation of co-creation process, which depending on the results that we obtain, it'll allow us to reflect and actually adopt changes in our monitoring plan pre-beginning, before we begin. Then comes the implementation phase in yellow. That's where we work with the nature-based solution, and according to the timeline, we start to make decisions, capture the data and analyze that data. Here, I wanted to write something that it may seem very obvious, but it's important to remember. Ideally, time zero is when the system or when the environment has not suffered any changes before beginning the intervention of the nature-based solution. But this is not always possible to measure in reality, time zero, in the implementation of day-to-day projects. So it's valid to think about a collection of secondary information in order to have an idea about the baseline in the past, and after begin with time one, time two, etc. Once we complete the first monitoring cycle, which is defined by the different users or the people that are implementing the nature-based solution, then we actually have a second assessment, but this assessment is not specific in the co-creation process, but now on the evolution of the results that were obtained by measurements through time, which means they're answers to the questions that were initially formulated. This ensures or allows us to be able to make decisions and be able to implement changes as things are being implemented. Next slide, please. In order to conclude, I wanted to leave you with some final take-home messages. We consider that within this framework, and by the simple fact of monitoring in a systematic fashion and with a process of robust co-creation, when we incorporate the different voices or the expressions of the different key stakeholders, we hope that other relevant aspects related to monitoring will also be included and will be relevant not only to the people that are implementing the solution, but also to all the users and potential users in the future. Next. The next point, and this speaks about the initial questions that we set for ourselves or that we showed you during the beginning of this presentation. When we reflect on the process of co-creation, then this process allows us to learn from our mistakes and to incorporate changes or implement changes in the planning phase for our monitoring plan. Also, when we monitor nature-based solutions, we can finally understand or know whether this solution is effective or not. And that will allow us to make decisions and assess the changes and allow us to make decisions in that regard. For example, we can have a nature-based solution where we want to improve connectivity, for example. And while we're implementing it or while we're working on the monitoring phase, then we start to realize that, yes, that it is improving connectivity, but possibly we're also measuring the different maybe we're seeing more animals being run over, but that's a moment when we can implement a change, for example, in our nature-based solution, because that's affecting the wildlife. And to finish, given the moment of nature-based solutions, another goal or objective for monitoring is to be able to generate or create information related to the results of these evaluations based on nature-based solutions worldwide, what works and what does not work in different contexts. And that can be shared by the international community so we can have better understanding and people can learn from each other from what works and what does not work. Next slide, please. I simply wanted to mention, as I told you at the beginning, that this is a team. It's not only myself. From the Institute, we have myself, Diana Rees, from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, we have Johannes Langemeyer and Sarah Meyer. And in this last slide here, we see the different partners in this consortium that have contributed to the different sessions and provided feedback during the creation of this assessment framework. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, and if we have time for questions and answers, I would be happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Isabel, for presenting the assessment framework. I also copied the link to the PDF in the chat, there you can find it. And yes, we have a few minutes for questions. So if there are any questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand to speak. And maybe because there is no question yet, I will start with one question. Are there any experiences already, Isabel, from the interlaced cities in using the framework, which you could already share, or is it too early in the process because it's not yet in the process?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the specific question that I couldn't hear very well?
Yeah, sure. I was just asking if there are already some concrete experiences from one of the interlaced cities in using parts of the framework, which are already possible to share, or is it too early to speak about?
No, absolutely, yes, there. Ay, no sé qué idioma hablar. Sí,
yes, of course, we do have solutions. No, forgive me, we do have processes that we've already started specifically in the metropolitan area of Krakow and with CBIMA as well. In the metropolitan San Jose, Costa Rica area, CBIMA area, where they actually chose or selected or they decided to focus on spatial prioritization module. The spatial prioritization module is used in order to better understand in which areas of our territories we should incorporate nature-based solutions, specific nature-based solutions, depending on the indicators and the criteria that is defined. Whether, for example, if I'm interested in solving maybe heat islands or heat focal points, the system related to mapping of these indicators of different weights of indicators will tell us exactly where it's more viable to establish a nature-based solution that would have this focus on reducing heat islands. But if I'm trying to have economic and financial connectivity, it would be in a different area of the map. So these two cities already went through the whole process of weighing the process and the mapping process as well, these two cities. And today in the Congress, Nature Networks Congress today, and a few days back during our Interlace encounter, we presented the results, the partial results that were obtained by the city of Krakow in terms of spatial prioritization. And with Costa Rica, we're also just about to finish those results as well. The other cities, with Envigado, we are beginning to design this monitoring module. Tomorrow and on Friday, they will be meeting with Humboldt Institute as well, with the support of Sarah Mestre from the University of Barcelona as well, the University of Spain as well, in order to formulate this monetary module. And the other cities are going through the decision process right now, trying to understand the module that they want to continue working with. So in next year, we will obviously we'll have the capacity of publishing the results in a formal fashion, but we will show you as we work on them as time goes by.
Okay, thank you very much for the insights. Unfortunately, we are running a bit out of time, so that's why I would move forward and introduce our next speaker. I warmly welcome Marta Liliana Perdomo. She's the General Director of the Botanic Garden of Bogota. She's an expert in biodiversity conservation, environmental degradation control, environmental education, environmental health management, promotion of human development and sustainable development. And she has long experience in these fields. Today, she will share her experiences in the monitoring and evaluation of nature-based solutions. We're happy to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much. A very good day to each and every one of you. Thank you, Felix. Thank you, Pablo Sosa, and thank you, Isabel, for contacting us in the Botanical Garden to share with all of you the information related to the Bogota Botanical Garden. They asked us to speak about urban settings. I'm going to share my screen for a second. We have subtitles in English as well, but I'm going to be speaking in Spanish. The first thing is to tell you that effectively the Bogota Botanical Garden is a public institution. Let's focus on Colombia, the best corner in South America, so you know where we're located. The Botanical Garden is this beautiful plot of land that you see here. We have a total land extension of 1,700 kilometers, but I wanted to do an analysis of 1.75 kilometers. The first thing is that 25% of our area, of our capital area, is an urban area, and 75% is rural, with more than, or 98% of the population of our urban area. Well, 25% of the territory is occupied by 98% of the population. That's what I want to say. And 75%, which is where we have the cloud forests, which actually provide us with ecological resources for our territory and provide us water and biodiversity. We have the Sumapaz and Chingasa cloud forests. They only have 2% of the population living there. So we're about 2,640 meters above sea level. Our ecosystems are high Andes cloud forest in the Andes mountain range. As a botanical garden, we're a public institution. We have a public administration that changes every 4 years. We have a different mayor, as most Latin American countries do. We have Mayor Claudia Lopez, a marvelous woman. She's the first woman mayor of Bogota, and she has emphasized quite heavily on everything related to social and environmental management for the city. In fact, our development plan is called a new environmental and social contract for the 21st century for Bogota, where there are 5 major purposes for the city, amongst others, to generate this social contract with equal opportunities for social inclusion at a political and productive level. And there we have the agriculture program, but our strength as a botanical garden precisely is referring to purpose related to changing our life habits in order to make Bogota better and adapt ourselves and mitigate climate change. And this is the bulk of our actions that are institutional focus on the Botanical Garden in terms of main economic factors and to make public spaces greener throughout our cities. That's our focus points. As a botanical garden, we have 67 years of life, and our mission is to investigate and conserve vegetation of the ecosystems of the high Andes and the cloud forest, contributing to the generation, the application, and social appropriation of scientific knowledge in order to adapt to climate change, to improve the quality of life for people, and to have sustainable development in the capital and the region. So we have three missions, three macro processes that we actually work with as an entity to generate, apply, and social and scientific ownership amongst the different ecosystems. In terms of our vision, well, our city in 2038 will be 500 years old, and our vision at that time is strategic in order to be recognized by that time at a national and international level as an investigation center, research center, which is a reference in terms of Andes and cloud forest ecosystems as a nature's natural destination that will contribute to transforming environmental thinking and focusing on sustainability of territory. Here we have the three mission macro processes that I mentioned earlier. And the truth is that in an event such as this one about nature-based solutions and nature cities, what is worthwhile doing, because the botanical gardens, what they do in their different work lines have to do with these nature-based solutions and stuff. The first thing is, as an investigation center, we generate knowledge, we investigate and research for conservation, we do knowledge management and wetland conservation and restoration and sustainable usage of our flora and our the flora that is those particular systems of our cloud forest and our mountain areas. We actually improve green coverage. So we are in charge of improving and increasing connectivity, ecological connectivity throughout the city, and increasing biodiversity in our public spaces in terms of social environmental services for our vegetation and green infrastructure like trees and gardening, urban agriculture, and restoration projects at an ecological level, which are part of that green infrastructure of our capital city. These are the responsibility in terms of improving and maintaining our botanical garden. And we also promote conservation, education, and environmental participation for ownership and engagement with the citizens to create an environmental culture in Bogota with different educational strategies for communication and participation strategies. They invited us to this space today to speak specifically about a program called Urban Agriculture, Multifunction, and Peri-Urban Agriculture. The first thing that I wanted to tell you about is about the multifunctionality of urban agriculture and peri-urban agriculture. Urban agriculture is a practice that allows us to grow food in small plots of land in the urban settings, in soft soils directly in the earth, but also in containers or in plots or pots and terraces and roofs, and any location will allow us to manage containers. For us, this is a practice that has allowed us to work not only in food security and nutritional safety, that people can produce their own food in small plots of land for their self-consumption and to diversify their diets and to learn about healthy living with a greater impact on their health with more plants, more vegetables and fruits. But also this is a space that will allow us to strengthen our social fabric and social connections, our neighbors, and strengthen an exchange of know-how and experiences amongst the different urban farmers, but also at a family level. It allows us to have an intergenerational dialogue amongst different age groups. This is a space where the farm becomes a pillar to strengthen our social fabric, and especially this is a practice that will allow the cities to contribute to the planning of the territory and environmental management in urban setting, because with urban agriculture, not only do we take advantage of small plots that were previously with concrete or to deposit trash or other areas, but now we take advantage of these spaces to produce food. We actually keep them beautiful and to continue to have better water and underground water, and also planning the territory better. At the same time, we manage waste that probably we're going to go to a landfill to produce greenhouse effects gases. Now this waste becomes compost and humus and allows to nurture and feed our farms. We also capture rainwater with our urban farmers as well. It's worthwhile to highlight that urban agriculture is a practice that has been promoted by the Botanical Gardens since 2004. by Lucho Garzón, which our previous mayor, and his government program, which was called Bogota with no indifference, and the pillar was food security. And in that, Bogota without hunger, which was his slogan, urban farming was one of the pillars for nutrition and food. And in the botanical garden at an institutional level in 2004, this appeared and has been maintained throughout all these years as part of our focus and our process at the Botanical Gardens works. And we've been working on issues of training and education and technical assistance to the different urban farmers and working with all of our citizens. And as you see in these different bars, you see that there are certain moments in time when the program started, there was a lot of training and technical assistance and strengthening the farm urban settings, and our own mayor Claudia Lopez, in our last development plan, she has strengthened the program quite a bit more as well, in such a fashion that at this moment we have a very solid work team that is working with communities on urban agriculture itself. In our development plan, we have a project called Strengthening Urban and Peri-Urban Agriculture in the urban localities of Bogota. The main focus of this project is to strengthen urban and peri-urban agriculture with a practice that will strengthen food production, environmental management, and the sustainable usage of natural resources, as well as social connections and social fabrics. From the project, we have three specific projects focuses. The first is to increase crop productivity, so that the urban farm, the space to grow, would be more and more productive every day. Under a perspective of production, agroecological production, the second goal is referring to strengthening institutionality within the city in order to guarantee that we have district program for agriculture and urban setting, but also a space so that different institutions, public institutions, can promote these types of practices and they can work together. And the third objective here is referring to the strengthening of the social fabric in terms of urban agriculture. So these are three different fundamental pillars to act: strengthening production, strengthening institutionality in order to guarantee that the programs are maintained through time and has the appropriate resource, and also strengthening social fabric in order to guarantee the sustainability of this urban agriculture program independent of what mayor comes to power. I'm going to share a few of the results that we have up to the moment, referring to the goals that we set for ourselves. So in the first objective, which was to increase productivity and crop returns in urban and peri-urban farms, we have a goal of training, which is quite high, which is to try to reach 20,000 people trained in these settings. Right now, we're 76% of our goal in our 4-year goal. Next year, in December, our administration ends, and we have more than 76% of the goal already, with 15,241 people already been trained in courses and in educational workshops and different. What do we train them in? From the designing of the farm itself, choosing the plants, irrigation, nutrition, drainage, growing crops, transformation, commercialization or marketing, and creating seed banks and greenhouses. This is all part of how we train all the people that we do. And we also provide technical assistance. We want to reach 40,000 people. We're at more than 24,100 people that have received our accompaniment, our support, and our technicians actually go and teach the people using a methodology of learning by doing. They teach them how they manage those urban farms and the best practices from this type of technology. And we need to also strengthen 20,000 farms. At this moment, we've only reached 9,300 farms that have received from the Botanical Garden small plants or seeds and different supplies. When these are community farms, they receive certain tools as well and certain maybe elements that will allow us to create a greenhouse. Another strategy that we foresee, and this is also very important when we speak about nature-based solutions, is related to the urban agro park. And it's important because the Botanical Garden is able to articulate our proposal with our district urban plan, our territorial land use plan for the city. Within our district plan, which is the agreement 761 of 2020, city agreement, we were able to publish an article that we called the Green Urban Renovation. And what does this mean? This is a strategy where, as a Botanical Garden, we propose that just as we do urban renewal, where we actually remove old buildings in order to build large buildings, well, we should also be able to knock down buildings or remove cement from certain areas of the city, and guarantee that the soil becomes soft again. That is also something that can be used and have vegetation. with urban forest as well as agro parks at an urban setting. We were listened to, we were heard, and it was included in the plan. And for us, it's very important to tell you that there are already some parts of our city where we've been able to go through this process related to removing cement in order to fill it with trees and articulate to these urban agricultural strategies. We were also able to have our land use plan for the city to also include that just a little while ago was adopted by decree by our mayor in December, and it's already in the works. It has certain legal challenges. We were able to include urban agriculture, and it was recognized as an environmental criteria for designing public spaces and sidewalks. So that means that some areas of the city are going to be able to have public spaces where the different farmers, urban farmers, can actually effectively produce food in these public areas without, and they still continue to be public spaces. And these consolidated cities that are mostly urban, we obviously have to have mechanisms that will allow us to guarantee a space in order to people to grow things in public settings. And we were able to have in this land use plans adding this as a in the different sidewalks. We're already going through a pilot program as well with an urban park. We were able to set the guidelines of an agro park, an urban agro park, together with the Colombian National University. And we're working on that process as well. Just to tell you that an agro park, what we understand an agro park to be, is this a farm that allows us to have different productive chains that integrates functionally within that same phase the production of agriculture, but it also includes and all agroecological management with the processes related to transforming the farm-based projects, commercializing and selling them, and with the bartering of these products as well. So we can actually link all of this within our economic and social reactivation process and the strengthening of the social fabric as well. So that means that the agro park will allow us to have crops, take advantage of solid waste, greenhouses, and take advantage of the crops, commercialize it, sell it, and obviously have complementary areas of passive recreation and environmental education as well, etc. We also have a fundamental pillar to act as an investigation center, which is developing not only investigations on high Andes species in the cloud forest, which are sustainable for urban agriculture, but also species that have been naturalized. And we've been working ever since 2004 in this process. We've already investigated more than 154 different species belonging to 62 botanical families that have been investigated. We've had as an investigation different work with different universities in order to advance on this purpose. So what do we do with each of the different species? We generate technological packages where we actually try to see what the best propagation management, crop management, plant health, and bioprospecting with these useful species for urban and peri-urban agriculture. And this is something that the large investigation center at agricultural do with crops that are extensive. Here we have to think about the species and the possibility of producing in small spaces and in containers, etc. So we have been working on these technological packages for smaller farming. We've been publishing different documents that you can see here, and you can find on our website as well, www.jjb.gov.co, so you can effectively look at these whenever you think it's appropriate, where we have technical guides to establish a urban farm, and also maybe recipes with Andes projects and urban and Andes food, and our protocols related to implementing farms in public spaces, which has already been regulated, and it allows us to understand the criteria that we need to consider in order to guarantee sustainability at a technical level, environmental and social sustainability for a public urban farm. We also have promotion and disclosure strategies by managing information and educational content and social media as well. So here's a little bit of the impacts that we've had on social media with the content that we publish. And we also have a web portal for co-creation, which we call Bogota is My Farm, which is a platform that allows us to communicate amongst all the different urban farmers. Agriculture, it's based with geo-based. You can find all the different geo farms in the city. Whoever produces can tell people that, and whoever wants to tell their story can also publish information here. It's worthwhile telling you right now that in this web portal, for a co-creation web portal, we have had a huge impact as well. We have several different publications, as you can see here. Our academic and cultural agenda includes on many occasions, different talks, different workshops, and etc. about urban agriculture and peri-urban agriculture. And we've been highlighting as well, in order to achieve that second goal that we talked about institutional strengthening and formulating the district urban agriculture program. We've been working with a very important work at a community level with territory dialogue tables, work tables, in order to better guarantee that we can have a program that it goes further than the botanical garden itself, and that involves other jurisdictions, other sectors for the development of the district, such as economic development projects to support productive projects related to urban agriculture, or like the health sector, to incorporate this as part of the nature-based therapies and promotion and prevention activities for health, or the Secretary of Education as well, in order to incorporate more and more spaces related to environmental classrooms and educational institutions. So we are formulating and implementing the district program for urban agriculture. And we've been working together as well in strengthening social fabric as well, which is a major point, our third major point as well, related to the creation of networks of urban farmers, urban agriculturalists. We already have 9 different networks composed. The last one was created a few days ago, it's not here, where each of these spaces are used to find ourselves and meet with the different urban farmers. We join our forces, we create a common work plan so that they and us can strengthen these practices together in their territories. We already have 290 leaders already linked to these 9 networks. More than 2,000 people have participated in our process related to citizen engagement. We've done more than 100 work days to dynamize these processes as well. As I told you, our platform, Bogota is My Farm, which is the microsite that's implemented and allows us to monitor exactly how all of this plays in related to urban agriculture, because there we can have everything related to what we're doing in our farms in terms of maintenance, technical assistance, and also related to volumes of production and the demand for the production at the urban farms. We actually won certain awards as part of Bogota's transparency. We've only been working for 9 months, but we have more than 15,000 users already. We've received already 50,000 visits in our website. We have another strategy to strengthen social fabric, which are called agroecological routes or goals. With the pandemic, with COVID-19, we use urban agriculture as a strategy to economic reactivation. And within our national development plan, we bet on 5 different agroecological routes. We already have 2. We're going to launch the 3rd one soon, which are actually farming circuits where we can actually offer tourism or tourism services to different local visitors and foreigners as well. So these 2 routes have allowed us, and here's a few pictures so you can see this has allowed us to reactivate farming and farmers, so you can effectively visit these farms and understand how they grow, how they harvest, how you can buy directly from these urban farmers. And there's a great array. This is a partnership that we did with the Tourism Institute. We call it the strategy from farm to farm. We have some of these routes that are designed in order to do this on bicycles to guarantee less environmental impacts as well in terms of greenhouse emissions and less impact. So this has been a very beautiful bet, and we have many of the farmers have joined this bet, and we've had a high demand already, an important demand of tourism at a local and foreign level. We have a commercialization strategy of the surplus, which are 15 agroecological farmers markets. They produce for self-consumption, obviously, but when they have a surplus, they need to have a place to exchange it or sell their goods. And we already have 15 farmers markets that we've already worked on. We began the year before last in June of 2021. We started, and we have sold close to 13,490 kilos in these farmers markets. We have had 504 different speakers, and we've supported the re-economic activation of our farmers and our urban agricultural farmers. And here are the urban farmers sell. Some of them are rural. Some of these are plaza from entrepreneurs, and these people not only have a space to sell their goods, but we give them a course on cleanliness and on managing food. We work with other institutions to guarantee a space for them. Not only do they come on the first weekend of each month to the botanical gardens to sell, but also in their local markets, they can also exchange and participate in barter and sell and participate in events to position and promote their products. Here's a few of the pictures of our farmer markets. That was our first year. We did a party here, as you see, in this space that has been a very important space for our urban farmers. And additionally, urban agriculture has been a strategy that has allowed us to, within that framework of urban transformation, allows us to transform many of these different lands. Like in the case of Colombia, in the centers or downtown the city, there are some places where we've identified the selling of drugs, and these are places of micro trafficking, which have been recovered by the nation or taken over, and those houses have been demolished. And the temporary use that has been given to these spaces is to turn them into urban farms. So we're talking about spaces that used to be drug sales with urban agriculture. Now here you see the before and after, and only 3 are, we're going to start the 4th one soon, where many of these district entities have joined forces to transform these spaces where there used to be death and drugs, and we turn them into a space where there's life and plants and the possibility of neighbors from the sector and children to actually go there to learn, to work, and to obviously take care of these spaces. And we've worked together with also urban agriculture, with other strategies from the district, like women that make things green. This is a strategy where Bogota links 5,000 women as part of our economic reactivation post-pandemic. So we give them a certain monetary transfers and a way in terms of training them in managing vegetation covers. And these women here, these 5,000 women that are working with the Botanical Garden contribute in the vegetation of the city as a strategy for mitigating climate change. And the Botanical Garden in Bogota has a slot for 1,000 women. The Secretary of the Environment works with the other 4,000. We have been able to guarantee for these women to be able to be trained in urban agriculture and gardening and urban planting, restoration of ecological settings, etc. And we already had almost all of them, 88% have already graduated, and 88% are women that are head of the households. More than 74% are women that are in charge of different people. And this strategy is part of something which is bigger that Bogota has as well, which is the district caring system, where the Botanical Garden has also contributed to this, and something that is called by the caring blocks, which are centers where the different caretakers, the people that are in charge of other people, go and are trained on different processes related to caring, or have a spaces to breathe, like a place to rest from their caretaking duties. Within these spaces, we offer not only technical assistance in farms, etc., but we also provide certain marvelous strategies related to the health and as activities to breathe, which is to have contact with nature. For us, urban agriculture is also about that, the possibility of promoting therapeutic and articulate this in prevention and promotion of people's health. So that was the information that I wanted to share you from Bogota. And we hope that it can be useful for all of you as well to have a reference to what we do.
Muchísimas gracias, doctora Marta
Thank
Liliana.
you so much, Dr. Marta Lilian. Definitely,
Es un ejemplo a seguir lo que
this is an example to follow what you guys are doing in Colombia. It's an example for us. From Mexico City, I can tell you that I am jealous. I am envious in a good way, because we have the same conditions. We're one of the larger cities, and we don't have a program such as the ones that you just showed us today. And it has so many different pluses, which is not only working on taking care of the environment alone or fighting against climate change, but rather it's also considering social cohesion, social fabric, and the importance that these programs have for the inclusion of all people in society. So I really wanted to thank you for your intervention and your talk, which truly has been very enlightening. I wanted to tell you that people have some questions. Ali Carrera is asking us, the communities that you work with, do they participate in one way or another in following up and assessing these programs, or is there any NGO that works with you as well? Yes, of course, we have, as a district, we have an accountability strategy which is periodic, where we have once a year, we have accountability sessions, but every 3 months, we have to do public hearings to prepare for these in a community fashion. So when in these hearings, we provide people the information, some people can see it. We have to obviously fine tune our assessment and assessment mechanism with citizen participation mechanisms, such as you saw the second goal, and precisely is to formulate this project. Very surely the strategies for following up and assessing the district program for urban agriculture, where we have the participation of not only the Botanical Garden, but other district entities. We're going to have a very important action point of following up and monitoring and social control of what we do as public entities at the service of urban farmers.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias. No sé si
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if anyone else would like to ask a question or any comments with the doctor
mediante el chat o levantando
in the chat or raising your hand.
De momento, Hansel nos pregunta.
For the moment, Hansel is asking, my question is whether the Botanical Garden in Bogota has worked with the country and the nation and with other territorial spaces in order to apply these programs in other spaces throughout the region. Well, at the beginning, we worked with the country, with the nation, in the Solidarity Network, a social from the national government. In 2004, the program was financed in Ciudad Bolívar. In fact, hand in hand with NRESA, the Food Security Network for the nation, and the Botanical Garden worked together, and we co-designed all the curriculum in the beginning of the program in 2004. Afterwards, what we worked on in Bogota, the nation replicated this in many different cities throughout the country, maybe not with the strength that is desired at this particular moment post-pandemic, which is part of the proposal that we're making to our new national government, that the Botanical Garden has investigations, has publications, has they know how to do things. In fact, we have a school for urban agriculture where we're going to graduate our next cohorts of the diploma program in urban agriculture, and that is available so that you can replicate it in other parts of the country as well, because we are completely conscious and aware that this is a strategy that not only contributes, as I told you, to social environment and management, but also in food security and social cohesion for cities. Correct. Thank you so much. At a personal level, I have a question as well for you. More at an international sentence, like Council's question, have you had any contact with any other city which is interested in the processes that you've developed as well in order to join or replicate these in another place of the world, or learn about your experience and be able to apply it in their own cities? Yes, of course. Our cities are throughout Latin America, and many of them come and look at our urban agriculture models. In 2008, the Botanical Garden worked for cities growing for the future, cultivating for the future. This was an initiative financed by Dutch and Canadian cooperation and sustainable development factors, promoting urban agriculture. In Brazil also, we went to Brazil to work in Salvador, Brazil, and Belo Horizonte to promoting urban agriculture. In Peru, we also worked as well. We also promoted this in Ecuador. So yes, we have had partnerships as a Botanical Garden with international institutions as well, and having exchanges of knowledge and experience. And here it's also worthwhile because this is a marvelous experience, the one that Rosario, Argentina is doing. Rosario, Argentina is a great place. They're actually leaders in urban agriculture. They've been working on this issue for quite some time. In 2005, we had the fortune of participating on the Week of Urban Agriculture in Rosario, Argentina, and try to see how they had actually worked on the land use plan with their land use instruments in Rosario, Argentina, with how they involved urban agriculture. There they have park farms, and a little bit of what we did in Bogota was to try to take their experience as well from Rosario with people such as Raúl Terrile, which is from Rosario, and he's been promoting this for many, many years now. And in Mexico, Pablo Well, we were presenting as well in 2010, the district urban agricultural program invited by REDAT, which is the Red of Authorities for Environmental Management Latin America and the Caribbean, with Moscoso, which works in Mexico and has also been trying to work with this. So I believe that in multiple Latin American cities, we've had many initiatives that we've tried to work with and promote so that these practices can continue to be promoted. And finally, our countries are all migrating from the farms to the cities. We're like the third, fourth generation in our cities, those that are now living, but that deep-rooted knowledge of our land, it still continues to be there as well. And that's what allows these types of practices to continue. And we have to promote them because these are strategies not only to make cities green again and to generate food for pollinizers. Here we have farms that are completely focused on pollinizers. There are many different urban farmers that have left part of their farms so that pollinizers can have food as well. And it's worthwhile to also mention that we can continue to promote these types of practices. Correct. Finally, a comment from Paula Rodriguez. Admirable, everything that you do in the Bogota Botanical Garden. Marvelous. Congratulations. Well, I think if there's no other questions or comments or questions, then we would conclude today's presentation. And I wanted to thank everybody that was here present in this webinar for Cities Talk Nature, and part of the Interlace project that wants to connect Latin America and Europe to implement nature-based solutions. I give Felix the word over so he can give us his final remarks as well as the representatives of the Climate Alliance, and we would conclude with today's webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, from my side, thank you very much for the very interesting insights from Bogota.